According to recent clinical psychological studies, up to 70% of high achievers are currently operating under a severe state of psychological exhaustion, yet they have absolutely no idea. They wake up drained, they stare at their screens with a profound sense of emptiness, and they silently punish themselves, mistaking their psychological collapse for mere laziness. I am Jessica, representing C letter 1ED9NG, D stroke letter 1ED3NG, Yarrow T I letter 1EBF, NG Ann, and today we are opening a profoundly different kind of masterclass. Deep conversations on psychology, mindset, and emotional maturity. In this series, we are not just upgrading your vocabulary, we are upgrading your internal dialogue. We are stepping into the profound intersection of C2 linguistic fluency and therapeutic self-awareness. Most intermediate English speakers, when faced with overwhelming mental strain, rely on basic, flat vocabulary. They say, "I am very tired," "I am stressed," or "I just don't care anymore." While these phrases express a feeling, they fail to diagnose the root of the pain. An elite, emotionally mature communicator possesses the precise vocabulary to identify their psychological state. When you can name the shadow, you strip away its power. Today, in our foundational part, we are going to dissect the anatomy of what happens when the mind simply cannot take any more. At the core of this discussion is emotional burnout. Burnout is not just feeling tired after a long day of work. It is a state of chronic physical and emotional exhaustion caused by prolonged stress. When emotional burnout is ignored, it leads to emotional depletion, a state where your internal emotional reserves are completely bankrupt. You have nothing left to give to your career, your loved ones, or yourself. This depletion often manifests as apathy, which is a dangerous psychological numbness. Apathy is the total absence of passion, emotion, or excitement. You do not feel sad, you simply feel nothing. And paradoxically, many people hide this emptiness behind high-functioning anxiety, a condition where an individual appears highly successful, organized, and driven on the outside, while internally they are propelled by a relentless, exhausting fear of failure. Let us train your vocal authority and your psychological awareness right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, deeply introspective cadence. Repeat emotional burnout, high-functioning anxiety, high-functioning anxiety. Now, shadow the full psychological statement with me. We must recognize the silent symptoms of emotional burnout hidden beneath high-functioning anxiety. Again, clear, articulate, and completely grounded. We must recognize the silent symptoms of emotional burnout hidden beneath high-functioning anxiety. One more time, feeling the profound truth behind the words. We must recognize the silent symptoms of emotional burnout hidden beneath high-functioning anxiety. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of emotional depletion and apathy. Repeat after me: emotional depletion, apathy, apathy. Now, shadow this full, elegant sentence. Prolonged emotional depletion eventually transforms into complete psychological apathy. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. Prolonged emotional depletion eventually transforms into complete psychological apathy. One more time. Prolonged emotional depletion eventually transforms into complete psychological apathy. Brilliant work! To understand how these concepts operate in real life, consider the story of Alina, a senior regional director at a multinational firm. To the outside world, Alina was the absolute picture of success. She managed a team of 50, consistently exceeded her quarterly targets, and always appeared perfectly composed in executive meetings. However, Elena was entirely driven by high-functioning anxiety. She believed that if she stopped pushing herself for even a single day, everything would collapse. After 3 years of relentless pressure, something inside her quietly broke. She began waking up feeling as though she were moving underwater. When her team achieved a major milestone, she felt zero joy. When a crisis occurred, she felt no urgency. She had descended into a state of profound apathy. Because Elena lacked the vocabulary of emotional maturity, she began to harshly judge herself. She looked in the mirror and thought, "I am just being lazy. I am losing my edge. I need to force myself to work harder." This brutal internal dialogue only deepened her exhaustion. The turning point occurred during a private executive coaching session. The coach listened to Elena's harsh self-criticism and gently stopped her. The coach said, "Elena, you are not lazy. Laziness is a choice to avoid work. What you are experiencing is severe emotional depletion. Your psychological tank is entirely empty, and you are trying to run a marathon on fumes." The moment the coach gave her the precise terminology, why naming it emotional depletion rather than laziness, the heavy burden of guilt evaporated. Elena finally understood the anatomy of her emotional burnout. She realized that healing did not mean pushing harder, it meant stepping back. With this new self-awareness, she requested a temporary sabbatical, restructured her daily responsibilities, and finally gave herself the unconditional permission to rest without guilt. By diagnosing her pain accurately, she saved her own mind. Now, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of emotional introspection line by line. This extended exercise is designed to train your vocal pacing, refine your pronunciation, and solidify a mindset of profound self-compassion. Relax your shoulders, take a slow, deep breath, and repeat out loud after me. True emotional maturity begins with the ability to accurately name our psychological pain without any self-judgment. We must recognize that relentless productivity driven by high-functioning anxiety is not a badge of honor. It is a direct path to severe emotional burnout. When we find ourselves feeling numb, unmotivated, or detached, we must not punish ourselves with accusations of laziness or weakness. Instead, we must possess the clinical objectivity to identify this state as emotional depletion and apathy. By replacing harsh internal criticism with precise psychological vocabulary, we remove the guilt from our exhaustion. We understand that our minds require profound rest just as much as our ambitions require profound effort. Moving forward, I am committed to monitoring my emotional bandwidth, silencing my inner critic, and treating my psychological well-being with absolute grace and intellectual clarity. Exceptional practice. You are building a powerful sanctuary within your own mind. Keep your breathing calm, hold onto this sense of inner stillness, and let us transition directly into part 2, where we will uncover the deep psychological tension of navigating cognitive dissonance and reclaiming our core values. Welcome back to part 2 of our masterclass on deep conversations, psychology, mindset, and emotional maturity. I am Jessica, representing C-1ED9NG D-1ED3NG, Yeru T, I-1EBF, NG An. Before we step into the profound depths of our next psychological pillar, I want to take a brief, intimate moment to truly connect with you. Sitting here and sharing these heavy, transformative concepts, I often wonder about the silent spaces where you are receiving these words. Where in the world are you tuning in from today? Are you listening during a quiet morning commute, or perhaps late at night when the rest of the house is finally still? Please drop a comment below and let me know your city and country. Additionally, how does the pacing of my voice feel to you? Is it allowing you enough space to breathe and absorb these complex ideas, or does it feel a bit too fast? We want this channel to be your personal sanctuary for growth, so if there are any specific emotional challenges or psychological topics you want us to explore in future episodes, leave your requests in the comments below. Our team reads every single one, and we are here to help you navigate your journey. Now, let us transition directly into our second core pillar with a profound philosophical question. Why do we frequently do things that, deep down in our souls, we know are actively violating our own principles? Why do we stay in toxic environments, agree to unfair demands, or compromise our integrity, all while feeling a deep, sickening knot in our stomachs? Intermediate speakers often describe this feeling simply as being confused, stressed, or feeling guilty. But an emotionally mature C2 communicator understands that this is not mere confusion. This is the heavy, exhausting architecture of cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the severe psychological tension you experience when your actions, behaviors, or environment directly contradict your internal beliefs and core values. Your core values are the fundamental, non-negotiable principles that define who you are. When you act against them, your brain registers an intense, internal conflict. To survive this painful internal conflict without going crazy, the human ego deploys a defense mechanism called rationalization. Rationalization is the act of inventing logical, acceptable, but ultimately false excuses to justify behavior that is actually hurting you. You tell yourself, I have to stay in this toxic job because the economy is bad. Or, I have to accept this bad treatment because nobody is perfect. Rationalization creates a temporary illusion of peace, but beneath the surface, the psychological tension continues to slowly destroy your emotional health. Let us train your vocal authority and your psychological precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, deeply introspective cadence. Repeat cognitive dissonance, internal conflict, internal conflict. Now shadow. W the full psychological statement with me. We must possess the courage to confront our cognitive dissonance rather than ignoring the internal conflict. Again, clear, articulate, and completely grounded. We must possess the courage to confront our cognitive dissonance rather than ignoring the internal conflict. One more time, feeling the profound truth behind the words. We must possess the courage to confront our cognitive dissonance rather than ignoring the internal conflict. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of rationalization and core values. Repeat after me, rationalization, core values, core values. Now, shadow this full, elegant sentence. We must stop using rationalization to justify behaviors that violate our core values. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. We must stop using rationalization to justify behaviors that violate our core values. One more time. We must stop using rationalization to justify behaviors that violate our core values. Brilliant work! To understand how cognitive dissonance and rationalization operate in the real world, consider the story of Marcus, a highly talented financial advisor. Marcus entered the financial sector because he possessed a deep core value of helping working-class families secure their financial futures. However, after joining a prestigious, aggressive investment firm, the corporate culture demanded something very different. Marcus was heavily pressured by his senior directors to sell high-fee, low-value investment products to vulnerable, uneducated clients just to boost the firm's quarterly profits. Every time Marcus closed a sale, he felt a sharp, sickening pain in his chest. He was experiencing severe cognitive dissonance. His actions were completely betraying his core values of honesty and service. To cope with this psychological tension, Marcus began using heavy rationalization. He looked in the mirror and told himself, "I am just doing my job. If I don't sell it to them, someone else will. Besides, I need this high salary to provide a good life for my own family." This rationalization worked for a few months, but the internal conflict was quietly eating him alive. He began suffering from insomnia, his temper became incredibly short with his loved ones, and he developed chronic physical fatigue. The psychological tension of living a lie was draining his life force. The breakthrough happened when Marcus finally stopped lying to himself. During a quiet weekend of profound introspection, he stripped away the rationalization. He admitted, out loud to himself, "I am violating my own integrity, and no amount of money can compensate for this cognitive dissonance." By naming the internal conflict, he regained his power. The following Monday, Marcus walked into his director's office, handed in his resignation, and walked away from the prestigious salary. He eventually started his own independent advisory firm built entirely on ethical practices. The moment his actions realigned with his core values, the psychological tension vanished. He didn't just reclaim his career, he reclaimed his soul. Now, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of psychological alignment line by line. This extended exercise is designed to train your vocal pacing and solidify a mindset of profound moral integrity. Relax your shoulders, take a slow, deep breath, and repeat out loud after me. True emotional maturity requires the relentless courage to align our daily actions with our deepest core values. We must become deeply aware of the heavy psychological tension that arises when our behaviors contradict our internal truth. When we feel that sickening internal conflict, we must completely reject the temptation of rationalization. We must not invent comfortable excuses to justify staying in toxic environments, compromising our integrity, or settling for less than we deserve. Instead, we must look at our cognitive dissonance with absolute honesty. By refusing to live in a state of contradiction, we reclaim our emotional energy and our psychological freedom. Moving forward, I am committed to silencing my rationalizations, confronting my internal conflicts, and ensuring that every decision I make is a pure reflection of my highest core values. Exceptional practice. You are building an unshakable foundation of inner truth. Keep your breathing calm, hold onto this sense of alignment, and let us transition directly into part 3, where we will unlock the shadows of our past through the power of radical introspection and inner dialogue. Imagine sitting alone in a darkened room, the silence incredibly heavy after a devastating, emotionally charged argument with someone you deeply care about. The echoes of your own raised voice are still ringing in your ears. Suddenly, a chilling realization washes over you in the quietness. The harsh words you just used, the defensive anger, the exact tone of your voice, it wasn't really you. In that moment of conflict, you sounded exactly like the parent who wounded you decades ago. You did not act, you simply reacted. I am Jessica, from C letter 1ED9NG, D stroke letter 1ED3NG, Yeru T I letter 1EBF NG Ann, and welcome to part 3 of our masterclass on deep conversations. Today, we confront the deepest shadows of the human mind. The power of radical introspection, unmasking subconscious patterns, and healing generational trauma. When an intermediate English speaker reflects on a mistake, they usually rely on surface-level language. They say, "I am just thinking about what I did," "I have a bad habit," or "my family was tough." While these phrases express basic regret, they completely fail to capture the architecture of the mind. An elite, emotionally mature communicator knows how to dissect their own psyche using clinical, precise vocabulary. At the center of psychological healing is introspection. Introspection is not just casually thinking about your day. It is the rigorous, objective observation of your own mental and emotional processes. It is the act of looking inward with absolute honesty. Through deep introspection, you develop self-awareness, the conscious knowledge of your own character, motives, and desires. What introspection usually reveals are our subconscious patterns. These are automatic, unthinking behavioral loops that control our reactions without our permission. We push people away when they get too close, or we lash out when we feel insecure, simply because it is a subconscious pattern programmed into us long ago. Often, these toxic patterns are inherited. This is known as generational trauma. The unhealed psychological wounds and destructive behaviors passed down from parents to children across multiple generations. To stop this cycle, an individual must completely restructure their inner dialogue, the constant, silent conversation you have with yourself every waking moment. Let us train your vocal authority and your psychological precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, deeply introspective cadence. Repeat introspection, introspection, generational trauma, generational trauma. Now, shadow the full psychological statement with me. Radical introspection is the only way to heal the deep wounds of generational trauma. Again, clear, articulate, and completely grounded. Radical introspection is the only way to heal the deep wounds of generational trauma. One more time, feeling the profound truth behind the words. Radical introspection is the only way to heal the deep wounds of generational trauma. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of subconscious patterns and inner dialogue. Repeat after me: subconscious patterns, inner dialogue, inner dialogue. Now, shadow this full, elegant sentence. We must rewrite our inner dialogue to break destructive subconscious patterns. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. We must rewrite our inner dialogue to break destructive subconscious patterns. One more time. We must rewrite our inner dialogue to break destructive subconscious patterns. Brilliant work! To understand how introspection and the breaking of generational trauma operate in real life, consider the journey of David, a highly intelligent but deeply volatile operations manager. For years, whenever a project faced a minor delay, David would explode in anger. He would aggressively micromanage his team, publicly criticize his employees, and then blame them for his own outbursts. He would say, "If they were just competent, I wouldn't have to be so angry." His lack of self-awareness was destroying his career and his relationships. The breaking point arrived when his most loyal and talented employee finally resigned, citing David's toxic behavior as the sole reason. Sitting in his empty office, David was about to blame the employee. But for the first time in his life, he stopped. He closed his door, sat in the silence, and engaged in radical introspection. He asked himself a terrifying question. Why is my first instinct always to attack when I feel out of control? Through deep introspection, David bypassed his ego and looked directly at his subconscious patterns. He remembered his childhood, growing up with a father who demanded absolute perfection and responded to every small mistake with terrifying rage. David realized with absolute clarity that his management style was not a reflection of his own true values. It was a subconscious repetition of generational trauma. He was managing his team exactly the way he had been parented. The moment David identified this, the pattern lost its power over him. He realized that his harsh inner dialogue, the voice that told him he must control everything or fail, was not his own voice. It was an inherited script. He chose to rewrite it. David began working with a therapist to cultivate deep self-awareness. When a project delayed a few months later, he felt the familiar surge of anger rising in his chest. But this time, his inner dialogue intervened. He silently told himself, "I am feeling a loss of control, but I do not need to punish my team to feel safe." He took a deep breath, stepped out of his office, and addressed his team with calm, supportive leadership. By choosing introspection over reaction, David did not just save his career. He broke the chain of generational trauma, ensuring that his psychological wounds would not be passed on to the people he led. Now, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of psychological liberation line by line. This extended exercise is designed to train your vocal pacing, refine your pronunciation, and solidify a mindset of profound self-mastery. Relax your shoulders, take a slow, deep breath, and repeat out loud after me. True emotional maturity requires the immense courage to look inward and practice radical introspection. We must refuse to go through life blindly reacting to our environments, constantly blaming others for our own emotional volatility. When we find ourselves repeating toxic behaviors, we must pause and examine the architecture of our own minds. We must possess the absolute honesty to identify our subconscious patterns and recognize when we are merely acting out unhealed generational trauma. The wounds of the past may not be our fault, but healing them is absolutely our responsibility. By rewriting our harsh inner dialogue with compassion and self-awareness, we break the chains of the past. Moving forward, I am committed to observing my own mind, mastering my emotional responses, and ensuring that my actions are a reflection of my conscious values, not my subconscious wounds. Exceptional practice. You are cultivating a profoundly beautiful and powerful sanctuary within your own mind. Keep your breathing calm, hold onto this sense of inner stillness and clarity, and let us transition directly into Part 4, where we will explore the architecture of boundary setting, releasing enmeshment, and the grace of saying no. 4. Boundaries are not cold, aggressive walls built to push people away. Boundaries are doors that teach people exactly how to enter your world safely and respectfully. I am Jessica, from C letter 1ED9NG, D stroke letter 1ED3NG, Yeru T I letter 1EBF, NG Ann, and welcome to Part 4 of our masterclass on deep conversations. Today, we are dismantling one of the most widespread psychological traps of our modern era. We are exploring the architecture of boundary setting, releasing enmeshment, and the grace of saying no. When intermediate English speakers talk about relationship exhaustion, they often use language that places them in the role of a victim. They say, "I just can't say no. People always take advantage of me." Or, "I don't want to make them angry." This language is rooted in fear and guilt. An elite, emotionally mature communicator, however, approaches relationships not from fear, but from a place of sovereign self-respect. They do not complain about being drained. They take absolute responsibility for their own psychological architecture. At the core of this architecture is boundary setting. Boundary setting is the conscious, intentional act of establishing physical, mental, and emotional limits to protect your well-being. A critical component of this is maintaining emotional boundaries, knowing that you can care for someone without absorbing their pain, and realizing that another person's emotional crisis does not have to become your psychological emergency. When people fail to set emotional boundaries, they often fall into people-pleasing dynamics. This is a toxic behavioral pattern where an individual constantly sacrifices their own needs, comfort, and values simply to avoid conflict and keep others happy. Over time, chronic people-pleasing leads to a dangerous psychological state known as enmeshment. Enmeshment occurs when boundaries are so deeply blurred that you can no longer tell where your emotions end and another person's begin. You feel responsible for fixing their moods, and you feel guilty when they are unhappy. To break free from enmeshment, you must cultivate assertiveness, the ability to communicate your needs clearly, firmly, and respectfully without an ounce of aggression or guilt. Let us train your vocal authority and your psychological precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, deeply grounded cadence. Repeat boundary setting. Boundary setting. Enmeshment. Enmeshment. Now, shadow the full psychological statement with me. We must break the exhausting cycle of enmeshment through clear boundary setting. Again, clear, articulate, and completely grounded. We must break the exhausting cycle of enmeshment through clear boundary setting. One more time, feeling the profound truth behind the words. We must break the exhausting cycle of enmeshment through clear boundary setting. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of people-pleasing dynamics and assertiveness. Repeat after me, people-pleasing dynamics. People-pleasing dynamics. Assert. Iveness. Assertiveness. Now shadow this full, elegant sentence. True assertiveness is the ultimate antidote to toxic people-pleasing dynamics. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. True assertiveness is the ultimate antidote to toxic people-pleasing dynamics. One more time. True assertiveness is the ultimate antidote to toxic people-pleasing dynamics. Brilliant work. To understand how the painful reality of enmeshment and the liberating power of assertiveness operate in real life, consider the story of Maya. Maya was a highly successful freelance architect, but in her personal life, she was the ultimate fixer for her family. Whenever her older sister experienced a minor inconvenience, a disagreement with a colleague, or a bad date, she would call Maya in a state of absolute panic. Because Maya was trapped in severe people-pleasing dynamics, she would drop whatever she was doing. She would cancel her own plans, sacrifice her sleep, and spend hours on the phone trying to soothe her sister. Maya was suffering from profound enmeshment She subconsciously believed that if her sister was anxious, it was Maya's duty to absorb that anxiety and fix it. Eventually, the lack of emotional boundaries drove Maya to total exhaustion. Her health deteriorated, and her architectural business began to suffer because she had no energy left for her own life. The breakthrough came when Maya realized that by constantly saving her sister, she was actually enabling her sister's emotional immaturity while destroying her own peace. Maya decided to engage in radical boundary setting. The next time her sister called at 11:00 p.m. in a state of dramatic panic over a minor argument, Maya took a deep breath and practiced true assertiveness. She did not get angry, nor did she apologize profusely. She kept her voice entirely calm, warm, but incredibly firm. Maya said, "I love you deeply, and I know you are upset right now. However, I do not have the emotional bandwidth to process this with you tonight. I need to sleep. We can talk about this tomorrow when we are both rested." Her sister was initially shocked and tried to induce guilt, but Maya held her ground. She did not over-explain, and she did not absorb the guilt. Over the next few months, as Maya consistently maintained these emotional boundaries, a beautiful shift occurred. The enmeshment dissolved. Her sister began learning how to self-soothe and manage her own emotions, and Maya reclaimed her time, her energy, and her psychological sovereignty. By saying no with grace, Maya actually saved the relationship. Now, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of boundary setting line by line. This extended exercise is designed to train your vocal pacing, refine your pronunciation, and solidify a mindset of profound self-respect. Relax your shoulders, take a slow, deep breath, and repeat out loud after me. True emotional maturity requires the profound realization that my energy, my time, and my peace of mind are absolutely sacred. I am not obligated to set myself on fire simply to keep other people warm. When I encounter unreasonable demands or emotional dumping, I refuse to engage in toxic people-pleasing dynamics. I recognize that saying no is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of deep self-preservation. I release the burden of enmeshment, understanding that I am not responsible for managing or fixing the emotions of other adults. By practicing calm, unwavering assertiveness, I build healthy emotional boundaries that protect my inner sanctuary. Moving forward, I am committed to communicating my limits with grace, rejecting unearned guilt, and honoring my own well-being with absolute, unapologetic authority. Exceptional practice. You are fortifying the walls of your emotional sanctuary. Keep your breathing calm, hold onto this profound sense of self-respect, and let us transition directly into Part 5, where we will move from the individual to the collective, exploring the absolute necessity of cultivating psychological safety and mutual trust. Several years ago, Google launched a massive, multi-year research initiative called Project Aristotle. Their goal was to discover the ultimate secret behind their most successful, high-performing teams. They analyzed everything: the intelligence of the employees, their educational backgrounds, their introversion versus extroversion, and their management styles. The final result was shocking. The single most important factor determining a team's success was not a high IQ, nor was it flawless operational processes. The definitive factor was a profoundly human concept known as psychological safety. I am Jessica, from C letter 1ED9NG, D stroke letter 1ED3NG, Yeru T I letter 1EBF NG Ann, and welcome to Part 5 of our masterclass on deep conversations. Today, we elevate our focus from individual emotional boundaries to the collective architecture of human connection. We are exploring the absolute necessity of cultivating psychological safety, fostering mutual trust, and power of constructive vulnerability. When intermediate English speakers describe a good team, they often use basic language. They say, "We are friendly," "We work well together," or "My boss is nice." However, being nice does not guarantee success during a crisis. An elite, emotionally mature leader understands that true collaboration requires a sophisticated psychological framework. At the very foundation of this framework is psychological safety. Psychological safety is the shared belief within a team that you will not be humiliated, punished, or rejected for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. Without it, a team is paralyzed by the fear of reprisal, the constant, suffocating anxiety that any misstep or disagreement will result in severe professional or emotional punishment. When you remove the fear of reprisal, you pave the way for interpersonal risk-taking. This is the courage to raise your hand in a room full of brilliant people and say, "I do not understand this," or "I made an error." To foster this environment, a leader must model constructive vulnerability. Unlike toxic oversharing or complaining, constructive vulnerability is the intentional act of exposing one's own limitations or past failures to demonstrate that the environment is safe. Over time, these actions forge unbreakable mutual trust, a deep, reciprocal reliance where every member knows they are protected by the collective. Let us train your vocal authority and your psychological precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, deeply grounded, and empathetic cadence. Repeat psychological safety. Psychological safety. Fear of reprisal. Fear of reprisal. Now, shadow the full psychological statement with me. We must cultivate psychological safety to permanently eliminate the fear of reprisal. Again, clear, articulate, and completely grounded. We must cultivate psychological safety to permanently eliminate the fear of reprisal. One more time, feeling the profound truth behind the words. We must cultivate psychological safety to permanently eliminate the fear of reprisal. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of interpersonal risk-taking and constructive vulnerability. Repeat after me, interpersonal risk-taking. Interpersonal risk-taking. Constructive vulnerability. Constructive vulnerability. Now shadow this full, elegant sentence. Constructive vulnerability is the catalyst for genuine interpersonal risk-taking. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. Constructive vulnerability is the catalyst for genuine interpersonal risk-taking. One more time. Constructive vulnerability is the catalyst for genuine interpersonal risk-taking. Brilliant work. To understand how psychological safety and constructive vulnerability operate in the real world, consider the story of Daniel. Daniel, a senior leadership coach deeply influenced by the philosophies of C1-E9NG, D-1E3NG, Yeru T, I-1EBF, NG An, was hired to take over a severely fractured, underperforming marketing division at a major tech firm. Under the previous management, the division was ruled by an intense culture of blame. If a campaign failed, the previous director would publicly humiliate the team members responsible. As a result, the team was completely paralyzed by the fear of reprisal. During Daniel's first few weeks, the boardroom was dead silent. No one proposed new ideas, no one challenged the status quo. Everyone was simply trying to survive without making a mistake. The mutual trust was completely bankrupt. Daniel knew that he could not demand innovation without first building psychological safety. During a critical quarterly review, the team was reviewing a recent product launch that had drastically underperformed. The room was tense, with everyone waiting for the inevitable screaming and finger-pointing. Instead, Daniel stood up, turned off the projector, and practiced a masterclass in constructive vulnerability. He looked at his team with complete calmness and said, "Before we dissect the data, I want to take ownership of something. The initial timeline I approved for this launch was far too aggressive, and it put an impossible strain on our creative team. I miscalculated the market readiness, and that mistake is on me." The room was stunned into absolute silence. The director had just admitted a failure without blaming anyone else. Daniel continued, "In this division, we are going to normalize interpersonal risk-taking. We are tackling complex problems, which means failure is a mathematical certainty. If you make an honest mistake, you will never face a fear of reprisal from me. We will analyze the data, extract the lesson, and move forward together." By deliberately exposing his own fallibility, Daniel shattered the toxic culture of blame. He proved that the environment was safe. Over the next 6 months, the transformation was staggering. Because they were no longer terrified of being punished, junior designers began pitching radical, highly innovative ideas. The team built an unbreakable bond of mutual trust, eventually executing a marketing campaign that broke all previous company records. Daniel did not just fix a failing team, he engineered a psychological sanctuary where brilliance could actually thrive. Now, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of collective healing line by line. This extended exercise is designed to train your vocal pacing, refine your pronunciation, and solidify a mindset of profound empathetic leadership. Relax your shoulders, take a slow, deep breath, and repeat out loud after me. True emotional maturity extends beyond self-awareness. It is the ability to engineer an environment where others feel profoundly safe. I understand that a culture driven by intimidation and the fear of reprisal will only breed silence, anxiety, and mediocrity. When I step into a room, I take absolute responsibility for cultivating psychological safety. I choose to model constructive vulnerability, openly acknowledging my own limitations to prove that our shared space is safe for growth. I actively encourage interpersonal risk-taking, celebrating the courage it takes to speak the truth, ask difficult questions, and admit honest mistakes. By prioritizing mutual trust over the illusion of perfection, I unlock the true creative and intellectual potential of the people around me. Moving forward, I am committed to being an anchor of safety, replacing blame with curiosity, and leading my team with unyielding empathy, integrity, and grace. Exceptional practice. You are mastering the highest form of human leadership. Keep your breathing calm, hold onto this sense of collective empathy, and let us transition directly into Part 6, where we will dive even deeper into the paradox of strength, the courage of vulnerability, and dropping the emotional armor. 6. Since when did we begin to confuse wearing a cold, heavy suit of iron armor with true strength? At what point in our modern, hyper-competitive culture did we collectively decide that feeling nothing, showing nothing, and needing no one was the ultimate symbol of power. I am Jessica, from C letter 1ED9NG, D stroke letter 1ED3NG, Yeru T I letter 1EBF NG An, and welcome to part 6 of our masterclass on deep conversations. Today, we are dismantling one of the most toxic illusions in professional and personal development. We are exploring the paradox of true power, the courage of vulnerability, dropping the emotional armor, and cultivating authentic connection. When intermediate English speakers talk about hiding their struggles, they often use defensive, surface-level language. They say, "I have to be strong," "I don't want them to see me cry," or "I cannot let my guard down." This language is rooted in a deep misunderstanding of human resilience. An elite, emotionally mature communicator knows that hiding is easy, but exposing the truth requires immense psychological strength. At the center of this paradigm shift is the concept of vulnerability. In classical terms, vulnerability means being susceptible to physical or emotional attack. But in the realm of psychology, vulnerability is the willingness to show up and be seen exactly as you are, with no guarantees of the outcome. People who fear vulnerability constantly wear emotional armor, a psychological defense mechanism constructed of perfectionism, cynicism, or emotional distance, designed to protect the ego from being hurt or judged. Those who wear heavy emotional armor view any display of struggle or emotion as a perceived weakness. A perceived weakness is something that society or the ego falsely labels as a flaw, when in reality, it is a profoundly human trait. By refusing to ever look weak, these individuals completely isolate themselves, destroying any chance of an authentic connection. An authentic connection is a relationship built on absolute mutual truth, where neither party is hiding behind a mask. To drop the armor and risk judgment requires the highest form of emotional courage. Let us train your vocal authority and your psychological precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, deeply grounded cadence. Repeat vulnerability, vulnerability, emotional armor, emotional armor. Now, shadow the full psychological statement with me. We must drop our emotional armor to embrace the profound power of vulnerability. Again, clear, articulate, and completely grounded. We must drop our emotional armor to embrace the profound power of vulnerability. One more time, feeling the profound truth behind the words. We must drop our emotional armor to embrace the profound power of vulnerability. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of perceived weakness and authentic connection. Repeat after me, perceived weakness, perceived weakness, authentic connection, authentic connection. Now shadow this full, elegant sentence. What the ego fears as a perceived weakness is actually the only bridge to authentic connection. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. What the ego fears as a perceived weakness is actually the only bridge to authentic connection. One more time. What the ego fears as a perceived weakness is actually the only bridge to authentic connection. Brilliant work. To understand how the heavy burden of emotional armor and the liberating power of vulnerability operate in the real world, consider the story of Victoria, a chief financial officer at a top-tier investment firm. Victoria was known throughout her industry as the Iron Lady. She was flawless, hyper-competent, and entirely devoid of visible emotion. She believed that as a female executive, Any display of exhaustion or doubt would be weaponized against her as a perceived weakness. Her emotional armor was impenetrable. During a massive, highly hostile corporate acquisition, Victoria was working 100 hours a week. The pressure was crushing her. She wasn't sleeping, she was barely eating, and her mind was beginning to fracture under the weight of the stress. Yet, she refused to ask for help, terrified that her colleagues would think she was breaking. The turning point occurred during a critical executive steering committee meeting. The board was pressuring her for financial models she simply did not have the physical time to complete. An intermediate leader might have lashed out in anger or made up excuses to protect their ego. Victoria sat in silence for a moment. She realized her emotional armor was suffocating her. She made a terrifying choice. She chose emotional courage. She looked directly at her CEO, lowered her voice to a calm, steady timbre, and said, "I need to pause this discussion. I want to be entirely transparent with this board. I am operating at the absolute physical and psychological limit of my capacity right now. I do not have these models ready because I am exhausted, and I can no longer carry the weight of this acquisition entirely on my own. I need the strategic support of this team today." For 3 seconds, the boardroom was dead silent. Victoria had just exposed her ultimate perceived weakness. But then, a profound psychological shift happened in the room. The CEO leaned forward, not with anger, but with deep respect. He said, "Thank you for telling us, Victoria. We have been blind to the pressure you were under." By dropping her emotional armor, Victoria did not lose her authority. She humanized herself. Her executive team immediately rallied around her, redistributing the workload. Her vulnerability did not repel them. It created an authentic connection that had never existed in that boardroom before. They realized she wasn't a machine. She was a brilliant human leader who trusted them enough to ask for help. Now, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of emotional courage line by line. This extended exercise is designed to train your vocal pacing, refine your pronunciation, and solidify a mindset of profound, unshakable strength. Relax your shoulders, take a slow, deep breath, and repeat out loud after me. True emotional maturity requires the profound realization that vulnerability is never a weakness. It is the ultimate measure of emotional courage. I understand that constantly wearing heavy emotional armor does not protect me. It only isolates me from the people I lead and love. When I am overwhelmed, exhausted, or in doubt, I refuse to hide behind the illusion of perfection. I reject the toxic belief that asking for help is a perceived weakness. Instead, I choose to step into the light, speak my truth with absolute dignity, and allow myself to be seen. By dropping my defenses and embracing vulnerability, I invite profound, authentic connection into my life. Moving forward, I am committed to laying down my armor, honoring my human limitations, and leading my life with an open, courageous, and beautifully unguarded heart. Exceptional practice. You are unlocking a level of strength that ego alone could never achieve. Keep your breathing calm, hold onto this sense of courageous openness, and let us transition directly into Part 7, where we will explore the profound healing power of unconditional acceptance and validation. Imagine the profound, heavy quiet of a room at 2 in the morning. Someone you care about deeply is sitting across from you, completely shattered. They have just experienced a catastrophic loss. Perhaps their company went bankrupt, their marriage dissolved, or their life's work was destroyed in an instant. They are weeping silently. What is your first instinct? If you are like most well-meaning people, your immediate psychological reflex is to open your mouth and try to fix it. You scramble to find a silver lining, offering unsolicited advice or reciting hollow cliches like, "Everything happens for a reason." But in that exact, agonizing moment, they do not need your solutions. They need your unshakable, silent presence. I am Jessica, from C letter 189NG, distro letter 183NG, Yeru T I letter 1EBF, NG An, and welcome to PAR. T7 of our masterclass on deep conversations. Today, we step into the most sacred and sophisticated territory of emotional intelligence, the healing art of unconditional acceptance, eliminating toxic positivity, and the power of emotional validation. When intermediate English speakers try to comfort someone in pain, they often rely on culturally programmed reflexes that actually cause more harm. They use phrases like, "cheer up," "look on the bright side," or "it could be much worse." While the intention is good, this is a dangerous psychological phenomenon known as toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is the cultural obsession with maintaining a relentlessly optimistic mindset, which results in the denial, minimization, and invalidation of genuine human suffering. It sends a subconscious message to the grieving person. Your pain is making me uncomfortable, so please suppress it. An elite, emotionally mature communicator completely discards toxic positivity. Instead, they offer validation. Validation is the intentional act of recognizing and affirming that a person's feelings or opinions are valid, understandable, and legitimate, even if you do not agree with them. To provide true validation, you must adopt a non-judgmental stance. You observe their pain without trying to label it, fix it, or rush them through it. This culminates in the ultimate therapeutic gift, unconditional acceptance or radical acceptance. Radical acceptance means taking the reality of the situation and the reality of the person's emotional state exactly as it is, without any resistance, condition, or demand for them to quickly get better. Let us train your vocal authority and your psychological precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, deeply soothing, and grounded cadence. Repeat toxic positivity, radical acceptance, radical acceptance. Now, shadow the full psychological statement with me. We must replace the harm of toxic positivity with the healing power of radical acceptance. Again, clear, articulate, and completely grounded. We must replace the harm of toxic positivity with the healing power of radical acceptance. One more time, feeling the profound empathy behind the words. We must replace the harm of toxic positivity with the healing power of radical acceptance. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of validation and non-judgmental stance. Repeat after me, validation, validation, non-judgmental stance, non-judgmental stance. Now, shadow this full, elegant sentence. True validation requires us to maintain a completely non-judgmental stance toward another person's pain. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. True validation requires us to maintain a completely non-judgmental stance toward another person's pain. One more time. True validation requires us to maintain a completely non-judgmental stance toward another person's pain. Brilliant work! To understand the immense difference between toxic positivity and unconditional acceptance, Consider a deeply moving professional scenario. Imagine a senior venture capitalist named Arthur who was mentoring a brilliant young founder named Leo. For 4 years, Leo poured every ounce of his energy, his savings, and his soul into a tech startup. Despite his brilliance, a sudden shift in global markets caused the startup to collapse entirely. Leo sat in Arthur's office, utterly destroyed, staring at the floor, drowning in shame and grief. If Arthur were an intermediate leader, he might have aggressively deployed toxic positivity. He might have slapped Leo on the back and said, "Don't worry, Leo. Failure is just a stepping stone to success. You'll build another company next year. Smile, it's not the end of the world." That response would have made Leo feel profoundly isolated, invalidating the catastrophic grief he was currently experiencing. But Arthur was a master of emotional maturity. He did not try to fix the unfixable. He sat back in his leather chair, maintained a soft but steady gaze, and practiced a masterclass in validation and a non-judgmental stance. He allowed the silence to hold the weight of the room for several minutes. Then, leaning forward, Arthur spoke with a low, calm, and incredibly grounded voice. He said, "Leo, this is absolutely devastating. You gave 4 years of your life to this vision, and losing it is a profound trauma. I am not going to tell you that there is a silver lining today or that this is secretly a good thing. It is terrible, and you have every right to feel completely broken right now." Arthur offered radical acceptance. He did not demand that Leo be strong. He did not rush Leo's grief. The moment Arthur validated the pain without trying to fix it, something miraculous happened. The heavy armor of shame that Leo was wearing instantly shattered. He finally exhaled, dropping his face into his hands, allowing himself to truly grieve safely in the presence of a mentor who accepted him unconditionally. By not rushing the healing process, Arthur actually catalyzed it. He proved that sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is simply bear witness to the pain of another human being. Now, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of therapeutic empathy line by line. This extended exercise is designed to train your vocal pacing, refine your pronunciation, and solidify a mindset of profound, unconditional love and respect for the human experience. Relax your shoulders, take a slow, deep breath, and repeat out loud after me. True emotional maturity requires the wisdom to stop trying to fix the pain of the people I care about. I completely reject the superficial comfort of toxic positivity, knowing that empty optimism only invalidates genuine human suffering. When someone I love or lead is sitting in the darkness, I do not drag them into the light before they are ready. Instead, I offer them the profound gift of radical acceptance. I maintain a calm, non-judgmental stance, holding space for their grief, their anger, and their exhaustion without demanding that they change. By offering absolute emotional validation, I create a psychological sanctuary where true healing can naturally occur. Moving forward, I am committed to being a steadfast witness to the struggles of others, providing my silent, unconditional acceptance with unwavering empathy and grace. Exceptional practice. You are cultivating a heart and a mind capable of providing true sanctuary. Keep your breathing calm, hold onto this deep sense of empathetic presence, and let us transition directly into Part 8, where we will turn inward to master our own biology, emotional regulation, amygdala hijacks, and the art of managing psychological triggers. Deep within the ancient architecture of your brain lies a tiny, almond-shaped cluster of neurons known as the amygdala. Its primary function is primal survival, serving as your biological alarm system. However, there is a profound, often destructive flaw in our modern neurobiology. Your amygdala cannot scientifically distinguish the difference between a hungry predator sprinting towards you in the wild and a highly critical email from your senior director. Both stimuli trigger the exact same biological panic. I am Jessica, representing C letter 1ED9NG, D stroke letter 1ED3NG, Yeru T, I letter 1EBF, NG Ann, and welcome to Part 8 of our Masterclass on Deep Conversations. Today, we turn our analytical focus entirely inward. We are moving from the collective environment to the mastery of our own biology, exploring emotional regulation, surviving amygdala hijacks, and the art of managing psychological triggers. When intermediate English speakers are provoked, they often use language that completely surrenders their autonomy. They say, "He made me so angry," "I couldn't control myself," or "I just snapped." This language places the locus of control entirely outside of themselves. An elite, emotionally mature communicator, however, knows that nobody can make them angry without their subconscious permission. They do not react. They master the biological space between the stimulus and the response. At the foundation of this self-mastery is emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is the conscious ability to monitor, evaluate, and modify your emotional reactions, especially in moments of high stress. Before regulation can happen, you must identify your psychological triggers, specific words, tones of voice, or situations that instantly provoke an intense, disproportionate emotional memory or reaction. When a trigger is hit, unprepared individuals suffer an amygdala hijack. An amygdala hijack occurs when the emotional center of the brain completely overrides the prefrontal cortex, the logical, rational part of the brain. During a hijack, you cannot think critically. You simply attack or retreat. The ultimate antidote to a hijack is the discipline to pause and respond. Instead of reacting in milliseconds, you artificially extend the time between the trigger and your action. By taking a breath, you reactivate your logical brain, allowing you to maintain absolute equanimity, a state of profound mental calmness, even temper, and undisturbed composure in the midst of a severe crisis. Let us train your vocal authority and your psychological precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, deeply grounded cadence. Repeat psychological trigger, amygdala hijack, amygdala hijack. Now, shadow the full psychological statement with me. We must recognize our psychological triggers to prevent a destructive amygdala hijack. Again, clear, articulate, and completely grounded. We must recognize our psychological triggers to prevent a destructive amygdala hijack. One more time, feeling the biological control behind the words. We must recognize our psychological triggers to prevent a destructive amygdala hijack. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of equanimity. ND, pause and respond. Repeat after me, equanimity, pause and respond, pause and respond. Now, shadow this full, elegant sentence. By choosing to pause and respond, we maintain our equanimity in the face of hostility. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. By choosing to pause and respond, we maintain our equanimity in the face of hostility. One more time. By choosing to pause and respond, we maintain our equanimity in the face of hostility. Brilliant work! To understand how avoiding an amygdala hijack and maintaining equanimity operate in a high-stakes, real-world setting, consider the story of Julian, a lead project manager overseeing a massive corporate merger. During a cross-departmental steering committee meeting, a deeply insecure and hostile department head decided to publicly scapegoat Julian. Without warning, the department head slammed his fist on the table, pointed directly at Julian, and shouted, "Your entire project timeline is a catastrophic failure. You are incompetent, and you are actively destroying this merger." This was a massive psychological trigger. Instantly, Julian's brain initiated a threat response. His heart rate skyrocketed, a flush of heat rushed to his neck, and his vocal cords tightened. His amygdala was screaming at him to either shout back aggressively and defend his ego or shrink away in humiliation. He was milliseconds away from a full amygdala hijack. But Julian was a master of emotional regulation. He recognized the biological sensation of the trigger. Instead of surrendering to the hijack, he executed the pause and respond protocol. He did not speak immediately. He closed his mouth, relaxed his jaw, dropped his shoulders, and took one slow, imperceptible, deeply regulated breath. In that 3-second pause, he brought his prefrontal cortex back online. He detached his ego from the insult. When Julian finally spoke, his voice was not defensive, nor was it loud. It was terrifyingly calm, slow, and anchored in absolute equanimity. He looked the department head in the eyes and said, "I understand that the merger timeline is a source of intense anxiety for your department. However, raising your voice and making personal attacks does not alter the data. The timeline was approved by the board based on the resources your team provided. If you have specific, measurable operational concerns, we can review the data together right now. Otherwise, we will continue this meeting with professional decorum." The effect was instantaneous. By maintaining equanimity, Julian did not just neutralize the attack, he exposed the department head's emotional immaturity to the entire room. The hostility evaporated because Julian refused to provide the oxygen of a reaction. By mastering his biology, he maintained complete sovereignty over the room. Now, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of biological and emotional mastery line by line. This extended exercise is designed to train your vocal pacing, refine your pronunciation, and solidify a mindset of unshakable internal power. Relax your shoulders, take a slow, deep breath, and repeat out loud after me. True emotional maturity requires the absolute mastery of my own biological responses. I understand that in any high-pressure environment, I will inevitably face unfair criticism, hostility, and severe psychological triggers. When I feel the sudden surge of anger or panic, I refuse to surrender my intelligence to an amygdala hijack. I do not allow the emotional immaturity of others to dictate my internal state. Instead, I claim the sacred space between the stimulus and my response. I take a deep breath, ground my physical body, and re-engage my rational mind. By choosing to pause and respond rather than blindly reacting, I project unshakable equanimity. Moving forward, I am committed to monitoring my triggers, regulating my nervous system, and ensuring that my words are always a product of conscious intention, never emotional reflex. Exceptional practice. You are building an impenetrable fortress of psychological sovereignty. Keep your breathing calm, hold onto this profound sense of biological control, and let us transition directly into Part 9, where we will explore the delicate balance of giving, compassion fatigue versus sustainable empathy. Deny. How do you continuously provide light for the people in your life without setting yourself on fire? How do you offer deep, meaningful support to a colleague, a friend, or a partner in crisis without allowing their tragedy to completely consume your own mental health? I am Jessica, representing C letter 1ED9NG, D stroke letter 1ED3NG, Yeru T I letter 1EBF NG Ann, and welcome to Part 9 of our Masterclass on Deep Conversations. Today, we confront the subtle and dangerous paradox of caring too much. We are exploring the critical boundaries of the human heart, surviving compassion fatigue, protecting your emotional bandwidth, and mastering sustainable empathy. When intermediate English speakers talk about caring for others, they often describe it as an unlimited resource. They say, "I am always here for you. I take on their pain," or "I feel exactly what they are feeling." While this sounds noble, it is a psychological trap. An elite, emotionally mature communicator knows that empathy without boundaries is a path to self-destruction. At the center of this dynamic is a condition known as compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is the profound physical, emotional, and spiritual exhaustion that occurs when you constantly absorb the suffering of others. It is the cost of caring too deeply without protecting your own emotional bandwidth. The finite cognitive and emotional capacity you possess to process stress on any given day. When you act as an emotional sponge for everyone around you, you risk experiencing vicarious trauma. This is a phenomenon where simply listening to someone else's intense pain or trauma causes your brain to simulate and experience that exact same trauma, leaving you depleted and anxious. The only cure for compassion fatigue is a highly sophisticated psychological skill known as empathetic detachment. Empathetic detachment is the ability to deeply understand, validate, and sit with another person's pain without absorbing it into your own nervous system. It allows you to transition from toxic, draining sympathy to sustainable empathy. A structured, boundaried form of compassion that allows you to help others for a lifetime without losing yourself. Let us train your vocal authority and your psychological precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, deeply grounded cadence. Repeat compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue. Sustainable empathy. Sustainable empathy. Now, shadow the full psychological statement with me. We must cultivate sustainable empathy to prevent the exhaustion of compassion fatigue. Again, clear, articulate, and completely grounded. We must cultivate sustainable empathy to prevent the exhaustion of compassion fatigue. One more time, feeling the profound balance behind the words. We must cultivate sustainable empathy to prevent the exhaustion of compassion fatigue. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of emotional bandwidth and empathetic detachment. Repeat after me. Emotional bandwidth. Emotional bandwidth. Empathetic detachment. Empathetic detachment. Now shadow this full, elegant sentence. By practicing empathetic detachment, we protect our emotional bandwidth while still offering profound support. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. By practicing empathetic detachment, we protect our emotional bandwidth while still offering profound support. One more time. By practicing empathetic detachment, We protect our emotional bandwidth while still offering profound support. Brilliant work! To understand how compassion fatigue destroys us and how empathetic detachment saves us, consider the story of Clara, a brilliant human resources director. Because Clara was naturally warm and deeply empathetic, her office became the unofficial therapy room for the entire company. Employees would constantly come to her to vent about their personal divorces, their financial crises, and their deep anxieties. Because Clara lacked empathetic detachment, she absorbed every single story. She carried the grief of her employees home with her. She would lie awake at 2 in the morning, experiencing intense vicarious trauma, worrying about the lives of 50 different people. Eventually, Clara hit the wall of severe compassion fatigue. Her emotional bandwidth dropped to 0. She began feeling resentful, numb, and irritable, even toward her own family. The very empathy that made her a great leader had burned her to the ground. The breakthrough occurred when Clara sought guidance from an executive psychologist. The psychologist told her, "Clara, being an anchor for others does not mean you have to drown with them." Clara began implementing the architecture of sustainable empathy. The next time a distraught employee sat in her office, Clara changed her internal posture. She leaned in, maintained soft eye contact, and listened with absolute presence. But in her mind, she visualized a clear pane of glass between herself and the employee. She practiced empathetic detachment. When the employee finished crying, Clara did not say, "I feel so devastated for you," taking the pain onto herself. Instead, she said in a calm, soothing voice, "I hear how incredibly heavy this is for you right now, and you have my full support as you navigate this." She provided immense validation without absorbing the trauma. When the employee left the room, Clara took a deep breath, consciously released the conversation, and returned to her own center. By establishing empathetic detachment, Clara ceased being an emotional dumping ground. She protected her emotional bandwidth, allowing her to be a far more effective, grounded, and sustainable leader for her team. Now let us practice. See shadowing this exact framework of sustainable compassion line by line. This extended exercise is designed to train your vocal pacing, refine your pronunciation, and solidify a mindset of profound, self-protective empathy. Relax your shoulders, take a slow, deep breath, and repeat out loud after me. True emotional maturity requires the profound realization that my emotional bandwidth is a finite and sacred resource. I completely reject the toxic notion that I must absorb the pain and trauma of others to prove that I am a caring human being. When people I love or lead are in crisis, I refuse to succumb to compassion fatigue. I do not act as an emotional sponge, nor do I allow vicarious trauma to destabilize my own nervous system. Instead, I practice the high-level discipline of empathetic detachment. I offer my absolute presence, my deep listening, and my unwavering validation, but I leave their pain in their hands. By maintaining clear emotional boundaries, I transition from draining sympathy to sustainable empathy. Moving forward, I am committed to supporting others with a generous heart, while ruthlessly protecting my own inner sanctuary with unyielding grace and authority. Exceptional practice. You are mastering the delicate balance of giving without losing yourself. Keep your breathing calm, hold onto this profound sense of sustainable power, and let us transition directly into Part 10, our final summit, where we will bring all these pieces together to unlock emotional maturity and the centered mind. Imagine a profound, vast body of ocean water. On the surface, it might be battered by hurricane winds, crashing waves, and chaotic, violent storms. But if you dive just 50 feet below the surface, the water is perfectly still. It is untouched, silent, and immensely powerful. This is the exact psychological portrait of a human being who has reached the absolute pinnacle of emotional evolution. They experience the fierce chaos of the external world, but their core remains completely unshakable. I am Jessica, representing C letter 1ED9NG, D stroke letter 1ED3NG, Yaru T I letter 1EBF NG An, and welcome to Part 10, the final summit of our masterclass on deep conversations. Today, we bring all the fragments of our psychological journey together to construct the ultimate architecture of the human mind, the attainment of emotional maturity, the inner sanctuary, and the centered mind. Throughout this series, we have dismantled burnout, confronted cognitive dissonance, broken generational trauma, set boundaries, and mastered our neurobiology. An intermediate English speaker and an intermediate thinker often views these as mere coping mechanisms to survive a difficult life. They chase fleeting happiness or external validation. But an elite C2 level thinker understands that these are not survival tactics. They are the blueprints for emotional maturity. Emotional maturity is not the absence of emotion, nor is it the suppression of pain. It is the absolute, graceful mastery over your internal state. When you achieve this mastery, you construct an inner sanctuary. Your inner sanctuary is an indestructible, psychological fortress within your own mind. It is a place of profound stillness that no external crisis, no toxic person, and no catastrophic failure can ever breach. From this sanctuary grows genuine resilience, not the brutal, exhausting act of fighting through pain, but the elegant ability to absorb impact, adapt, and return to your center. This resilience is the foundation of self-actualization, the highest level of human psychological development where you fully realize your potential, untethered from the opinions of others. And when you interact with the world from this centered state, you emit an emotional resonance, a quiet, powerful frequency of calm and safety that instantly stabilizes and elevates everyone around you. Let us train your vocal authority and your psychological precision for this final peak. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, deeply grounded, and majestic cadence. Repeat emotional maturity, inner sanctuary, inner sanctuary. Now, shadow the full psychological statement with me. We must cultivate emotional maturity to build an indestructible inner sanctuary. Again, clear, articulate, and completely grounded. We must cultivate emotional maturity to build an indestructible inner sanctuary. One more time, feeling the profound stillness behind the words. We must cultivate emotional maturity to build an indestructible inner sanctuary. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of self-actualization and emotional resonance. Repeat after me. Self-actualization, self-actualization, emotional resonance, emotional resonance. Now shadow this full, elegant sentence. True self-actualization creates a powerful emotional resonance that elevates others. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. True self-actualization creates a powerful emotional resonance that elevates others. 1. More time. True self-actualization creates a powerful emotional resonance that elevates others. Brilliant work. To understand what it looks like when a human being operates from this ultimate center, consider the story of Alina, a senior global diplomat who had spent a decade negotiating a complex, multinational peace and trade treaty. On the very eve of the signing, a sudden political betrayal by a key ally caused the entire treaty to collapse. The media erupted. Alina's political rivals launched a vicious public character assassination, blaming her entirely for the failure. Her own staff was in a state of absolute panic, expecting her to either break down in tears, resign in disgrace, or launch an aggressive, furious counterattack. But Alina possessed absolute emotional maturity. When the news broke, she did not react. She retreated into her office, closed the door, and stepped into her inner sanctuary. She allowed herself to feel the profound grief of the loss without judgment, practicing radical acceptance. She recognized the biological trigger of panic in her chest and paused to breathe, preventing an amygdala hijack. She practiced empathetic detachment, refusing to absorb the frantic, toxic anxiety of the media and her staff. When Alina finally emerged to address the international press conference, the room was chaotic, hostile, and loud. But the moment she stepped to the podium, something incredible happened. She did not shout over the reporters. She simply stood in silence for 5 seconds, looking out with soft, unyielding eyes. She projected a massive emotional resonance. Her profound internal stillness acted like a gravitational force, pulling the entire room into her calm. The shouting stopped. The room fell silent. Alina spoke with a voice that was deeply resonant, relaxed, and anchored in truth. She said, "The collapse of this treaty is a profound disappointment, but it is not the end of our diplomatic vision. I will not engage in the politics of blame, nor will I surrender our core values to this temporary setback. We will restructure, we will learn, and we will return to the table." Alina demonstrated true self-actualization. She did not need the treaty to define her worth, and she did not need the media to validate her identity. By remaining anchored in her inner sanctuary, she did not just survive the storm, she became the calm that conquered it. Now, my brilliant, ambitious friends, let us practice shadowing our final, most comprehensive psychological decree line by line. This extended exercise synthesizes everything you have learned in this masterclass, locking in your vocal authority, refining your cadence, and sealing your identity as an emotionally mature C2 global thinker. Relax your posture, ground your breath, and repeat out loud after me. To achieve true emotional maturity, I must accept absolute responsibility for the architecture of my own mind. I understand that the world will always be chaotic, unpredictable, and demanding, but my internal state remains completely under my sovereign control. I choose to dismantle my emotional armor, confront my cognitive dissonance, and practice radical introspection. I fiercely protect my emotional bandwidth through clear boundaries and empathetic detachment. When faced with hostility or crisis, I do not react with panic. I pause, I breathe, and I respond with unshakable equanimity. I have built an indestructible inner sanctuary that no external force can disturb. From this quiet center, I lead with constructive vulnerability, radical acceptance, and profound resilience. Moving forward, I am dedicated to the path of self-actualization. I will navigate the complexities of human relationships and global challenges with a centered mind, projecting an emotional resonance that heals, elevates, and inspires everyone I meet. Congratulations! You have officially completed this profound 10-part masterclass on deep conversations, psychology, and emotional maturity. You have not only elevated your linguistic precision to an elite level, but you have rewired the very dialogue of your soul. Keep cultivating your inner sanctuary, keep speaking your truth with grace, and continue walking through this world with unyielding composure and profound emotional mastery.